on the wall. It's time for the licensing committee. So we have apologies from councillors Lucioni, Spink and Jones-Evans. We think Councillor Love is on holiday and possibly meant to formally submit apologies, but may have neglected to do so. And we haven't seen Councillor Redrup, but we are quorate, so we can continue. I think everyone is familiar with the fire procedure. Leave, go down the back stairs and don't come in until it's safe, and don't use the lift. So unless anyone wants me to read it out in full, we can carry on. The minutes have been circulated. The last meeting was Monday, the 20th of January. Did anyone have any issues with those minutes? I propose them and ask for a seconder. Councillor Quirk, all in favour? Happy with those minutes? Yeah, thank you. They are signed. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to the matters on the agenda this evening? There are not. We have to elect a vice chair to the committee, which we currently do not have, as we've not met since that point in the year when chairs and vice chairs, oh, you know what I'm trying to say. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? Yes.
Chair, I'd like to propose Councillor Beston, please.
Are there any other nominations? I need a seconder. Vice chair. I was coming to that. Well, we have a nomination. It's been accepted. Can I ask for a vote? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Congratulations, you are now vice chair. Public question time. We have no questions that have been submitted and no one in the public gallery. And members' question time, we have had no questions submitted and nothing has been raised by me as a potential urgent matter. So I think we can move straight on to item 7. We have 2 reports to consider. And I think the first is the approval of, hello, Councillor Redrup is joining us. A couple of minutes behind time. You've missed all the exciting stuff. We're moving on to the reports. The approval of Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicle licensing fees, which appears in the bundle at page 9. I think I'm turning to Mr. Winchcombe for that.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Licence Committee. Thanks for coming along today to this hearing for the reports that we've got in front of you. The report regarding licensed vehicles or taxi fares, vehicle fees, and just want to make sure we're clear that we're talking about the fees that the licence holders have to pay the department, not the table of fares which relate to the cost of a taxi trip. Under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976, local authorities are required to consult the trade if our fees are to be above £25 per vehicle for Hackney Carriage, private hire vehicles and private hire operators licences. The fees haven't been increased for a number of years. We felt that looking at our cost recovery process that we may be under recovering and the cost of us carrying out those activities. And as you're all aware, that licensing fees contribute to the licensing department with ambition of being self-financing. So our costs that have to be reclaimed through the trade and are done so at full cost recovery. You will see it section 7, that the old fees and proposed new fees are listed there. It is our intention to put these fees in place from the 1st of April next year. So we undertook a consultation with the trade. You will see the comments at Appendix 1, and most of those comments at Appendix 1 relate back to sort of correlating the fees that we charge the licence holders with the taxi table of fares. We can't consider that today. The taxi table of fares is a completely different matter altogether, and please do not get involved into that conversation today. So what we have to do is we received the comments. You can see them quite clearly. Appendix 3 were received, and as you can see, that there is no real objection to the fees being increased. We need to do so to increase our revenue to make sure we're cost effective. And all we need to do today is to consider those comments that have been raised, and that the fees that we're proposing are fair and reasonable and represent the cost that it undertakes, costs of the licensing department and undertaking those tasks. So, Chair, thank you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take those on through you. Thank you.
Can I just ask one additional point which might be of assistance? When were the fees last raised?
Andrew and I had that conversation, and I've been in post for 15 years, and I'm not convinced they've been increased substantially in that time.
Okay, so there are questions from members.
Thank you. Just, it's not a criticism at all. There are some UK authorities that review their licensing fees annually. So it hasn't been done for a while, although they're not particularly as a significant impact on the operator. If the fees were reviewed annually and applied annually, would that be a fairer way to do it with the operator, or are we guided, set in stone by this policy?
And thanks, Councillor Beston. The legislation, we are bound by legislation. If we increase these particular fees, we have to carry out a consultation every single time we increase them.
So on that, so I'm assuming the cost to the licensing authority by doing a consultation each year has obviously a significant financial impact. And is that the reason why we don't do that?
I think that's probably fair, and also the pressure that we're also putting on to the trade every single year with regards to that. So that's where we are. We feel that these fees can be put in place for the next 3 years because we've done a 3-year forecast.
Don't see any other questions. Apart from Councillor Beston.
So we've got a new fee for the private hire operator's license, a 3-year grant of license. Is that just an add-on? Is that just a new fee, i.e. from the 5-year license?
Yes, Councillor Beston, we introduced that as an option for a private hire operator to either go for a 3 or 5-year license. Legislation allows us to issue them up to a 5-year license.
There being no other questions, I've got nothing else I wish to ask. The recommendation is that the licensing committee approves the increase in Hackney and private hire licensing fees from the 1st of April 2026. So I'll look to a vote. All in favour, please show. That is unanimous, everyone. Thank you. Which means we move on to the remaining piece of business for this afternoon, which is the street trading licensing policy, which appears at page 17 in the bundle. This time, this is not approval as such, but a recommendation to the Policy, Finance and Resources Committee that is sought, as appears at paragraph 4. So again, Mr. Winchcombe or Paul?
Thank you. Yes, so we've recently carried out a review of our street trading policy. Street trading consent is required if any person wishes to offer or expose any item for sale in a designated street where people have right of access without payment. Back in 2014, the licensing committee resolved that all current and future roads, streets, footways, beaches, service areas, and any other area to which the public have access without payment were to be defined as consent streets for the purposes of the legislation. The policy sets out how applications are made, what factors are considered in determining the applications. All of the proposed changes to the policy can be found at Appendix 1. In summary, we've added some clarification at 1.8 and 4.1. That was just to say that in the majority of circumstances, decisions will be made by officers, but obviously if we feel we need to bring it to committee, we will do. And 4.1 is in relation to the council not having specified areas or pitches for trading, that the onus is on the applicant to find a suitable location. We've tightened up expectations around the issue of access without payment. That is an issue which normally comes up in relation to events. Some event organisers will look to cordon off their area to make it effectively private land and therefore exempt from street trading. But it's just sort of clarifying that if you're going to make this private, there are certain responsibilities that come with that in terms of your duties to members of the public on your land. In other words, please don't put a piece of rope around Eastern Gardens and claim that it's private. We expect the area to be clearly defined going forward because we've had issues with that in the past. The main areas that we've added Section 7, consumer choice and fair business practice in relation to locations of traders in respect of sort of, not trading immediately outside similar business in a high street when they're paying business rates, that sort of thing. We've added Section 8 in relation to the suitability of applicants and a requirement for a DBS certificate to be submitted for anyone sort of trading on a permanent basis. We don't expect that for a one-off event, but if you're trading from the same location all year round, we want to be sure that you're a suitable person. Section 11 has got details of the streamlined process for one-off or small annual events. And we actually introduced this. It was signed off by a decision notice in January 2024, and it's been used quite successfully. The reason we introduced that was because we were having event organisers come to us sometimes 3 weeks before Christmas saying they wanted to put on an event. Within the terms of the policy, we were continually having to try and deviate from that policy to allow the event to take place. So as you know, not to disappoint, but we also had to try and be consistent. So we've introduced a shorter process where they don't have to advertise in the paper. There's no requirement for the DBS because it is a one-off 1 or 2 day event. And they can apply up to 8 days before. The only stipulation with that is that all of the documentation and all of the payments have to be made at that point, because obviously it puts considerable pressure on the officer dealing. We've added some conditions in respect of food handlers at Section 14 and Section 18 to say that officers may carry out inspections from time to time to ensure compliance, as this wasn't in the previous policy. So the consultation commenced on the 26th of September and ended on the 24th of October. notification went out to all existing street traders. We currently have 13 consent holders. I believe 6 are static, 7 are mobile. Officers also made a couple of additional amendments during that consultation period. We have increased the number of stalls on the streamlined process from 5 to 10, as it was felt that that would be more beneficial to the organisers of small events. And we added a paragraph for 8.7, which was just in relation to failing to disclose any information when we're determining the suitability of an applicant. So out of the consultation, we had 3 representations. They can be found at Appendix 2. The first comment makes reference to the cost to traders of obtaining £10 million in public liability insurance and the fees charged for street trading activities. The fees themselves don't form part of the policy, so won't be considered as part of this report. The other 2 comments received also queried why £10 million public liability insurance is required. That figure has been recommended by the Council's senior insurance officer and is now the required level of cover across a range of licensable activities. Another comment suggested that the policy made it a requirement rather than just encouraged for vehicles and equipment used for street trading to be environmentally friendly, i.e. low/zero emissions, and officers have since amended the draft policy to state that any new applications received where a vehicle or equipment is to be used must conform to the low and zero emission specifications. Existing consent holders will be permitted to renew their consents without change unless they choose to replace their existing vehicles, in which case they will be expected to conform with the low and zero emission requirements. We received, out of the 3 representations, 2 comments were made recommending that we restrict the number of traders in one street, as they feel that this would provide protection to existing traders. Officers consider that the draft policy at section 7 both protects existing businesses and traders alike. It prevents any monopoly of an area and provides consumers with choice. The policy allows decisions to be made on a case-by-case basis whilst considering all relevant factors. So officers are of the view that that should remain. We did seek some information from the planning department as to how they deal with planning applications relating to competition. And they replied to say that they don't have any policy guidance relating to competition. The Planning Acts and national guidance are very clear that planning authorities cannot determine applications based on company competition, which is to be left to the market to dictate. Finally, one of the representations said that they believe the Isle of Wight Council was the only authority who charged for the use of the highway to trade, and they challenged why they needed to pay that. That is a separate issue. The Highways Department require that fee to be paid. We collect the fee, but it isn't part of the licensing regime. And the individual who made that comment has received a separate reply from the Highways Department giving an explanation as to why that's required. So the revised policy will continue to regulate street trading on the island, ensuring the safety of pedestrians, road users, customers, as well as protecting the amenity of and the land where the trading will take place. If adopted by the Policy, Finance and Resources Committee, the policy will remain in place for a period of 5 years from the 1st of April 2026. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that full summary. In which case I shall move to questions. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of observations and a couple of questions, please. The 10 million liability, that's something that I've had some residents contact me about, and if there could just be a bit of clarification around why that is put out there. Obviously, it's in the document, but I think it needs to be pulled out separately, just to highlight to people. And I believe that more councils are going to be adopting the £10 million. Maybe put reference to that if there are some examples we can pull up across. Also, the difference between the license and the rent, that's been a frequent question. I probably have had at least half a dozen businesses in my ward come to me asking the difference between the two. I appreciate that sometimes that has been in reference to street furniture licenses, but I think that these two are both sort of half of the course in respect to that. So if there could be a difference, again, articulated a little bit better, because there's some people that you'd think are been in the game long enough to understand the difference that are quite clearly missing the message between what a license entitles them to do and what the renting of the area entitles them to do, and where the different fees go to. My first questions are around the beaches being included. Does that include beach concessions as well as beaches that are currently unconcessioned, if that makes sense? Because there would naturally be an assumption, of course, that if you've given a beach concession to a trader, that they would be allowed to trade without having to get a separate approval through a trader's license.
Yeah, so my understanding, the beach concessions themselves are dealt with by, what is the department?
Comes under,
Parks and Beaches.
oh, yeah, comes under Natasha Dixie's area now.
So if you're on the beach or on a certain side of the esplanade, is how it was explained to me some time ago, it comes under the Parks and Beaches department. We don't issue consents for those. That's them. Anything on the highway side, I don't know how to explain it, but that's how it was explained to me. If you're on the beach side, on the seaside, it's them. If you're on the other, it's us.
So to clarify, if you're on the beach, you wouldn't need a street trader's license, because that seems to be the implication through this policy. What I'm saying is, like, if they've already got, I appreciate, again, this is very similar to the street furniture thing in terms of you've got to rent the area and get a license. However, you say under the beach concession, you effectively have granted them permission to run their business off of that beach. And if we're therefore going to start charging them a license fee to put some deck chairs out, for instance, that seems to be counterintuitive.
I think what we probably need to clarify is that if they're issued a beach consent or a concession, they will not require street trading as well as the concession. If that answers your question there, Councillor. It's not a duplication of licenses or concessions. It's one or the other.
That'd be very helpful, Kevin. Thank you very much for that. Second question is around the DBS. Now, I appreciate entirely that they've been dropped for the short terms, but obviously DBS checks can take a long time to come back at the moment, particularly at the moment. And would that DBS, obviously it'd have to be specific to the council rather than holding a DBS for some other organisation. If that DBS is slow coming back, would that be preventing that person from beginning their street trading? And therefore limiting that, or could a concession be put in that if one's been applied for at least, and you're waiting on one to come back? Because I have heard stories of them taking up to 3 months to come back. Now, if someone's starting a trading, say in the spring, you don't want to be halfway through the summer before they're allowed to start trading, waiting on a DBS check.
I mean, that's not something we've discussed. Ordinarily, if someone's applying for a street trading consent, they need to allow 2 months anyway. So that's quite a long period of time. We haven't had that conversation as to, yeah.
If that's something that the committee would like us to consider or change the policy accordingly, we can do that. My concern would be that we may be allowing someone to trade who's not fit and proper to trade, and then the consequence of that back on the local authority for permitting someone to trade who shouldn't be. So we are happy to amend the policy accordingly. Officer recommendation would be that we wouldn't grant it. However, if the committee would like us to change the policy, that is within your realm to do so as councillors who set policy, etc., etc.
Thank you for that. So I would just, I entirely get why DBS is in there. Yeah, particularly around street trading, you're likely to be involved for vulnerable individuals and stuff, and there's no barrier between that. But however, I would hate for a a bit of red tape to stop a perfectly willing and able person to be street trading because of a wanting this DBS to come through, which as they can take weeks and weeks and weeks at the moment, and it is holding up a lot of community organisations, for instance, getting individuals to them. So I was just highlighting it as a potential issue, but so they appreciate this could open a can of worms in terms of debate. But back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I interject and ask, is there any basis upon which a conditional consent can be granted, as in pending receipt of a DBS? That might deal with the issue.
Yes, I mean, there wouldn't be any issues with issuing a consent. And then if something did come up on the DBS, because we've issued a consent and not a licence, a consent can be revoked at any point without a right of appeal. So we could grant a consent and look to revoke on those grounds. It's just that in between period where possibly someone who isn't suitable has been trading for a number of weeks before that DBS comes back. But as Kevin says, that's a matter for committee.
Perhaps a little more thought could go towards that, because it is a sound point, I think, just so we have a clear position to go, should we be recommending this to go to the PFR committee.
We can update the policy accordingly if you would wish us to do so as a recommendation from this committee, that we grant with a condition that if it comes back on the DBS, what we do also need to be, and there will all be a risk that I need to add to the report accordingly, that if someone is trading and if something was to occur whilst that person was trading, then I'm not sure where we would sit from a liability point of view for the local authority. And that would be a risk element that I have to make quite clear in the report. I'm not trying to put you off. I'm being honest with how I would have to report. I'm not sure if Jodie's got anything to add to that in that relationship, a legal point of view. But
No, I was only going to really echo what you were going to say, is that whilst you can, doesn't necessarily mean that you should, because obviously you are opening yourself up to risk, aren't you? I would say if you're applying for a street trading licence, you need to know what's required of you. And if a DBS is required, then you submit that with your application. The delay is not the council's fault.
No, it's obviously what you have to do is if you begin this application, you have to apply for a DBS specific to this to this instance. So it's not something you can just carry around previously. You can't apply for it previously, you know. So it would seem perverse that if you could fill the rest of the forms out probably in a day, that you're then waiting on an unknown amount of time. Now, it might be a very, very small number of cases that this applies to, that someone is awaiting a DBS before they can begin street trading. So I would hate for someone to be waiting on a bit of bit of paper, a bit of red tape to get through, preventing, which is purely just a matter of due course, rather than having to say it's totally out of their hands, then rather than just get on with it on proviso that they could be dragged off if it was bad. But I say.
Okay, shall we just pause that? We'll come to the recommendation in a moment. Perhaps if we just reflect on that and see if we do want to put a recommendation in when we come to that point in the meeting. I had Councillor Ward and then Councillor Redknapp.
Thank you, Chair. Can I seek your advice, really? And I'm not sure whether this comes under street trading, but I've got areas in my ward which are council property, which are surrounded by railings, and invariably there are long advertisements on there. I took one down the other day, which is maybe as long as 2 tables, canvas advertisement for holiday homes. Is that allowed? Does that come under street
it doesn't
trading?
come under licensing. I believe that it will be, you will need to speak to development control. Okay, that would probably be that there are advertising regs which planning look after.
Oh, okay. They're there all the time.
Thank you, Chair. My question was on the 10 million again. I just wanted to ask, you said it was recommended that it would be 10 million, and I was just wondering why is it recommended that it would be 10 million?
I think we probably need to get further clarity from the senior insurance officer. That is the recommendation that was sent through to us from him in relation to that, and that is quite common, and this has been raised in every time it's put into a report that there's a requirement for licensing holders or license holders to have a 10 million public liability. That is a recommendation from that team, and I guess from our point of view as officers, we have to follow that guidance. But if we need a more, Jodie's moving her microphone, so I'm going to leave Jodie to answer.
No, again, I'm just going to back up. I guess all of these issues are looking at what level of risk we're prepared to expose the council to. So same applies with the DBS, but also then with the 10 million public liability. It's not saying that all of those street traders face that level of risk, but it is the worst case scenario. And obviously our insurance providers, but again, it is standard up and down the country that they would recommend that we cover ourselves for the worst case. So
I think the point I would thought you were going to say is that courts are paying out more when cases are settled or awards are made now than they were a few years ago. Councillor Beston.
Yeah, just rewind to 9.2. So I'm quite pleased to see the amendment of that particular part of the policy. I do support it. My question is, it just relates to the Euro emission standard. So 4 for petrol and 6 for diesel. Is that for the operator to provide you details of their particular vehicle and their emission status, or is it for the licensing authority to find out?
No, that would be for the applicant to provide that proof at the time of making the application.
Okay, so what kind of information are they obliged to pass? I know there is an online tracker that you can use. You put your details in, that gives you the Euro code. What kind of piece is it? A certificate or?
Yeah, when I researched it, because I hadn't heard of any of these, but it seemed that on a registration document or it's fairly straightforward to be able to obtain a certificate which actually gives the details of those emissions.
Don't see any other questions coming forward. I was just wondering, is that something that's on the MOT these days?
Chairman, I
Might be
imagine
worth
there
us
is something
checking.
around that on the MOT emissions, which maybe we probably just need to clarify around the equipment and how we manage equipment, generators, etc.
Thank you. There being no questions, the recommendation that appears on the paper is that at paragraph 4 on page 17, that the licensing committee recommends to the Policy, Finance and Resources Committee that they approve and adopt the revised street trading licensing policy. A couple of points have been raised. Are members wanting to propose any further alterations or potential alterations to the policy and what we recommend? Councillor Baker.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to propose that we put in just a dispensation for awaiting a DBS check should it be held up at no fault to their own. So, for instance, government taking a while for the DBS to come back, that doesn't prevent someone from commencing their street trading. Or words to that effect.
Chair, can I just, if that is a recommendation the committee would like to go down, can we sort of tweak it a little bit to say that a application has been made? Okay, but otherwise we could get it delayed even further by people not making applications for DBS.
Of course, yeah.
Do we need to formally vote on whether that's part of the record?
So you want to check
Well, we have a proposal from Councillor Blake, but we haven't got an indication from other members. So I think we should ask members if they are happy with what Councillor Blake is proposing to come forward as an amendment to the recommendation. I suppose I need a seconder in this regard. Councillor Beston seconded. Councillor Gladwin, were you wanting to say something?
Well, I was just wondering if we are not opening ourselves up to, you know, sort of very bad press and disrepute to the council if there was a problem with it. I'm just wondering whether it's a risk worth taking.
Councillor Redrup?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable to vote for this. I don't think it's just a piece of red tape. I think it's an important safeguard in case something bad were to happen. It's due diligence. While I completely empathise with it taking a long time, I think you need to be prepared. And if you know that a DBS is going to take a long time, you need to allow more time before you make your application.
So I agree with that.
And if we're debating this point, my personal view is the DBS issue is potentially a temporary one. The timescale does change. So are we saying something that would just deal with a temporary problem and leave us with a unnecessary situation going forward when the timescales improve? But a suggestion has been made and has been seconded, so I will need to take a vote on whether Councillor Blake's suggestion should be part of our recommendation going forward. Can I have all those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 3. So that is now part of the draft recommendation. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote on the main recommendation?
Only to say, Chair, that we'll obviously this come for PFR, so hopefully once the wordings come out, PFR will then have a second signed off and a chance maybe to reflect on this, and we'll all have a chance to see whether we like it or not at that stage.
Yeah, that's totally correct. And I think there is a briefing put in for the relevant committee later on.
So it's not a final decision. This is a recommendation to PFR, and they will obviously make their own decision, which will be the final decision in this matter. We have the recommendation. It has been amended. Can I ask for all those in favour of a recommendation to adopt the policy being put forward to the PFR committee? That is all in favour? Unless I'm very much mistaken, concludes our business for this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attendance. I close the meeting at 4:37.